Hello. Today I'd like to talk about Martin Buber. He was a Jewish philosopher. He didn't start out that way. When he was born in Germany. Did it say where? I don't see where he was born. Vienna, excuse me. And he was born in 1878. And when he was 3 years old, his parents got divorced, and he was sent off to be raised by his grandparents, who were very devout Jews. Now, he grew up in this environment, away he goes. But very shortly as he comes of age, he really just kind of abandons all religious following and all that type of thing. He went to University of Vienna. He studied philosophy and literature, and he marries a German Catholic woman who later will convert to Judaism. But nonetheless, this is a very anti-Semitic culture. There's a lot of prejudice against Jews. And to be honest, that kind of wakes him up to his own faith. And in 1904, he's a professor now at a university in philosophy, and he takes a leave of absence in order to do serious study in Hasidism. This Hasidism is a movement where it's a Jewish movement of religious renewal that was started by a gentleman named Baal Shem Tov in Eastern Europe in the 18th century. And as he understood it, it's like God's to be seen in everything and to be reached by every pure deed. Now, Buber, even though he had gotten into this Hasidism, which is a major Jewish specialty type of thinking, he did not practice a real Hasidic practices. He was much more practical in terms of living a regular life. But he saw that there was like a worldly holiness, that there is a chance, he wrote, that the task of each man is to affirm for God's sake the world and himself, and by the very means, to transform them both. In 1909, after 5 years of studying Hasidism, he goes back to work as a professor, and he starts to write. And his first major novel is called I and Thou. In this book, he's talking about the relation between nature and human existence. The fact that all humans are basically subjects by the quality of their relationships to others. Who's the other? Well, the other is nature. The other is the divine, the eternal thou. And the other is other people. Thus, with our own humanity, we become defined by the relationships we have with others. We're not defined just unto ourselves as an isolated some little being that we often mistake ourselves to be, but rather in relationship with others. Now, he's doing this development, and he attains a fairly good position in 1933. He gets dismissed from his job because he's at the University of Frankfurt now, and the Nazis are starting to take over, and with a Jewish professor, well, that can't be. So by 1938, he has to actually leave the country, and he is very fortunate in being able to leave. He's 60 years old, and he goes to Palestine. And he thought that this was like, the absolute best for his life. He just thought, holy cow, here I am in Zion, I'm all ready for it. But the big push for the Zionist ideal seemed to have been to have a Jewish nation, and he thought, that's a terrible idea. He thought the best thing to do is the fact to be able to share with the Palestinian Arabs and the fact that they could have a joint custody. And so the fact is, in 1948, when they militarily became a separate state, it was basically a bitter fulfillment of his worst fears. And what's hard to realize about this Martin Buber is the fact that he had more influence on Christian spirituality than almost any other person of his day. And the reason is he would freely talk about Jesus. When he talked about Jesus, he saw a person, he had a lot of affection for us, but also he saw that Jesus exemplified the highest ethical and spiritual ideals of Judaism. Now, we think of like Jews over here and Christians over here, and we're in two different realms, but he didn't see it that way at all. Now, he's not accepting the divinity of Jesus, so he understands some basic differences, but he believed in dialogue. He thought that with dialogue, we could share with each other that common belief we have in the Father, that common understanding. And many Christian scholars learned a lot about their Old Testament and the Jewish roots of our faith in Christianity, and the fact that we're not an independent little group of Christians. We actually have this Judaic roots, which is a whole wealth of spirituality and insight and understanding. Well, that was all good. But ultimately, as he went through, he didn't get all the discussions to happen as he would have it. You heard how it was in Israel, and it's still, it's been battling ever since 1948. They've never been at peace per se, and while they have truces now, that's kind of an open question. But the idea of dialogue is one in which those of us who are different, adoring and worshiping our God, but different, we should be in dialogue with each other. We might gain more from it. We may understand Jesus better if we understand the Jesus Jewishness better. I can't help but think about Pope Francis. He's got a new document, and in his new document, he released October 3rd, I'm trying to think of the name of it right offhand, Fratelli Tutti. In this new document, he talks a lot about countries and nations and different religions all coming together to be in dialogue. It sounds so much like a Martin Buber approach, and yet for the Pope to be saying it, for all of us to consider being in dialogue with those who are different, that's a challenge. It's not as easy as it is to talk to just a bunch of people that would agree exactly as we have defined it. But we don't define our God. No, we worship our God. We love our God. And in the fact that he could see the fact that the way we understand ourselves is our relationships with our earth, our nature, the very sky above us. I was out earlier, saw the clouds, and they're like just beautiful. It's like, holy cow, how pretty is that? It's in our relationship with people, and ultimately then it's in relationship with that something more, our God. May we be blessed today in all of our relationships and treasure them with such a sense of gratitude. Thanks.